Malcolm how to fix it. So I don't know if I've ever said this on the show before, but I think that the first Iron Man movie, which kickstarted the now juggernaut Marvel Cinematic Universe, is one of the best that the MCU has to offer. When I first saw the trailers and commercials, I wasn't expecting much. I mean, I watched the 90s Iron Man animated series, but I was always a bigger fan of Spider-Man's. And Tony Stark is played by the bad guy from The Shaggy Dog. Jeff Bridges is Obadiah Stane. It seemed like it was gonna flop, and yet, when I finally did see it, after having seen Captain America, the First Avenger, I'm a little late when it comes to Marvel movies, still haven't seen Civil War or Black Panther yet, I fell in love with it, and whenever faced with what MCU film is my favorite, it's a toss-up, but Iron Man always seems to win over Captain America. Robert Downey Jr.'s perfect performance as Tony Stark is just one of the reasons why it's a great movie. It had a solid plot, great characters, and everything fell together perfectly. So after I saw Iron Man, and considering that I saw it in 2012, that meant that Iron Man 2 was waiting for me to watch it, and it was on Netflix at the time, so I booted up Netflix and watched it, and I didn't like it. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's not the worst movie out there, but it was an ordeal for me to get through, and I did not enjoy the experience like I had with the previous film. Since Avengers Infinity War is due out this month, I figured that we should look at the first sequel that got the ball rolling in creating the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And no, the Incredible Hulk movie doesn't count because no one saw that. I mean, I did, but considering that apart from the Hulk appearing in the other movies, none of the other plot threads seem to continue on, it's not really a linking thread in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But the thing is, no one else seems to dislike Iron Man 2 like I do. The Rotten Tomatoes score is certified fresh. Am I the problem? Is Iron Man 2 a good movie? If so, why did I hate it when I watched it 6 years ago? Let's not waste any more time and see if Iron Man 2 is as bad as I remember, or if maybe I've misjudged a decent movie all this time. The film starts out in Russia, where Ivan Vanko, played by Mickey Rourke, son of Anton Vanko, a former partner of Howard Stark, is sitting with his dying father, and he sees a news report with Tony Stark, swearing revenge on Tony for his father's disgrace. He starts creating armor based on the arc reactor design as Tony Stark, Robert Downey Jr., is opening up the Stark Expo for a year of science, fun, and nationwide peace, including a speech that sounds like Marvel talking about the MCU as much as it's Tony talking about Iron Man. But as the night winds down, he's served a subpoena to appear before a Senate committee in regards to his Iron Man suit being a military-grade weapon in the hands of a civilian. The head of the committee, Senator Stern, the late Gary Shandling, calls both Rhodey, played now by Don Cheadle, and Justin Hammer, Sam Rockwell, to testify against letting Tony keep the suit because it's also inspiring other countries to create their own, though Tony shows them that no other country is anywhere near figuring it out, including Hammer himself, whose prototype Iron Man suit backfired big time. Though this is less of a concern to Tony because he's dying. The palladium used in the arc reactor's core is not only burning out fast, but also slowly poisoning him. As such, he makes Pepper, the CEO of Stark Industries, and appoints Natalie Rushman, Scarlett Johansson, as his new assistant so he can focus his entire intellect on figuring out what element he can use to power the reactor and not poison him, though it doesn't seem as if such an element exists. While at a racetrack in Monaco, Tony decides to throw caution to the wind and replace the American racer, but the race is interrupted by Vanko, who shows up carrying electro whips that can slice cars in half, but with the help of his Iron Man suit, Tony vanquishes Vanko and he's carted off to jail. Tony tries to tell Pepper that he's dying, but Pepper is stressed from her CEO duties and brushes him aside. This causes Tony to start a lot of self-destructive behavior because, well, he's dying, and apparently he lives by Kurgan rules.
It's better to burn out than to fade away.
Vanko's death is faked, and he's escorted from prison by Justin Hammer, who wants to use Vanko's intellect to help improve his Iron Man suits, as Rhodey has to play damage control because Tony said that no one could have Iron Man tech, and some Russian dude just happened to get a hold of it days later. At Tony's birthday party, the self-destruction comes to a head, and he gets drunk while wearing the suit, disgusting Rhodey, who steals the Mark II armor and fights Tony before flying away with it, turning over to the US military, who have Hammer outfitted with advanced weaponry. Following that, Tony is approached by Nick Fury, Samuel L. Jackson, who gives him more of Vanko's backstory and a box of Howard Stark's effects, containing a secret message in it that's the key to creating an entirely new element. He also reveals that Natalie Rushman is actually Natasha Romanoff, the Black Widow, who was put in place as a spy for S.H.I.E.L.D. Tony begins work on synthesizing the new element as Pepper attends Hammer's demonstration of his new drones, since Vanko has been playing Hammer and creating new Whiplash armor on the side. But Hammer also has the War Machine armor, so he's not that mad. During the demonstration, Vanko calls Tony and tells him that he will have his revenge, but Tony is unable to triangulate the call. He flies to Hammer's demonstration at the Stark Expo and confronts them both, as Vanko takes remote control of all the drones and Rhodey, chasing Tony around as he tries to avoid letting the drones kill any innocents. Black Widow and Happy Hogan, director Jon Favreau, go to Hammer's facility to capture Vanko as Pepper and Hammer try to wrest control away from him. By the time Black Widow gets there, Vanko's long gone, having went after Tony, but she manages to get Rhodey's suit detached from the code so that he and Tony can fight side by side against Vanko. They're almost beaten, being tangled up in the whips, but by using the same technique they used to accidentally blow up Tony's mansion during their fight, they vanquish Vanko, but he has one final trick up his sleeve. His suit and all the drones are rigged to explode, including one that's close to Pepper. Tony flies off to save her, and they watch all the drones explode from a rooftop, where Pepper resigns as CEO. At the end, Tony is approached by Fury, who says that based on Black Widow's report, they only want Tony as a consultant, and he agrees to that, in exchange for forcing Senator Stern to be the one to give Tony and Rhodey their medals for their valorous activities. And the movie of course ends with Agent Coulson finding Thor's hammer in New Mexico, foreshadowing the events of the next movie in the phase. So, I admit I might have been wrong when I first saw this movie, because there is a whole lot of good stuff in this movie. First off, Tony's arc in the movie, his character journey with his mortality, is very well done. I especially like how Tony Stark, the coolest, suavest person in the world, still has trouble telling the people he cares about that he's dying. The fact that he can't even tell Rhodey that he's dying is the most striking part, because you know how good friends they are, and Rhodey is only pushed away because Tony refuses to let him in the know, so he just thinks that Tony's being reckless for the hell of it. I know everyone loves Tony's arc post-Avengers with the near-death experience, but I don't think I've ever seen anyone praise this movie, because you know what? This movie makes me sympathize with that character arc. And obviously, Robert Downey Jr. plays the part very well. He was born to be Tony Stark. On the flip side, Sam Rockwell is really damn good as a villain. After Galaxy Quest and Moon, I knew he was good at drama and comedy, which is useful in a superhero movie since they tend to balance the two, and this reaffirmed my suspicions. And I like Hammer. He's charismatic, he's basically Tony Stark but evil, which is really the type of villain that works well against Iron Man, someone who's a match for him in terms of outward personality. Mickey Rourke is okay as Whiplash. I like how he spoke Russian more than English, because that's something that foreign-born villains don't do enough in fiction. The acting was fine, and I really like how we're shown through both villains that they're both facets of Tony. Vanko is Tony's intellect, and Hammer is Tony's public persona. And despite what Vanko's father did, you can't help but feel bad for Vanko. All that potential wasted because his father betrayed Howard Stark. It's very compelling character background. It's like that scene in the first movie where Obadiah Stane says that Tony built the arc reactor in a cave with a box of scraps. Vanko did the same thing in Russia, and he got to Monaco to fight Tony. I mean, he can do what Tony can do. He was just never given the opportunity to do it. I also think that Don Cheadle is a decent replacement for Terrence Howard. It's still a shame that Howard never got to wear the War Machine armor, but honestly, I like this Rhodey better. It helps that they give Rhodey a lot more to do in this movie, especially with their stuff with Tony, especially with how Tony's reckless behavior grates on even Rhodey. There's also a lot of touching stuff between Tony and Pepper. Their relationship is the best part of the movie, in my opinion. Gwyneth Paltrow does a good job with the character, though I was convinced of that from the first movie. I also really like the way that Black Widow is introduced. Within 3 minutes of her first being on screen, she takes down Happy Hogan when he makes a sexist remark. It's why she's one of the best characters in the MCU, despite some missteps that they've made with her. Why the hell doesn't she have her own movie? She also takes out Hammer and hacks into Vanko's computer to stop War Machine. Black Widow is awesome and elevates this movie just by being in it. And Samuel L. Jackson as Fury and Clark Gregg as Coulson are great, but I don't think I have to sing their praises because it should be obvious. The fight scenes, on the other hand, are phenomenal. The effects are obviously awesome, and the action scenes are well put together. From a cinematography standpoint, the movie is pretty damn beautiful, and Favreau, who also directed the first one, is a top-notch director. I know superhero movies aren't known for being the pinnacle of the art form, but come on. Look at that and tell me that that shot wasn't composed well. This is true of a lot of the MCU movies, but the dialogue is really good and really snappy. The rapid-fire back and forths between Tony and Pepper, anything that Hammer and Vanko say, it's all really well written and suits the scenes that they're in very well. I also think that the film worked in regards to implementing the Avengers stuff and tie it together without making this an extended Avengers promo. It's overall an Iron Man movie, but we get Fury, we get Coulson, and Black Widow, who makes sense to be introduced in an Iron Man movie because she first appeared in the Tales of Suspense issue starring Iron Man. It's stuff like that that makes me love the Marvel Cinematic Universe. They seem to care a lot more about character histories outside the movies than DC does, at least. I also like that there are consequences for the arc reactor. Lets us have Tony face his own mortality, and it lets Tony have a good moment with his dead father. Another aspect that I liked was how the government, especially Senator Stern, is scary in hindsight. Knowing that Hydra eventually takes over at the highest levels and that Stern is one of them, puts his desire to take the Iron Man technology to be much more sinister now. Obviously, the Iron Man suits look awesome, and the initial Whiplash armor is cool too. The later version from the ending is amazing, though. So are the drones. That's a given. The music is really solid. It was done by John Debney, who's done a whole lot of music for a whole lot of notable movies, but I think the music in this movie is my favorite. It's always fitting for the scene, and always exciting when it has to be exciting, and introspective when it has to be introspective. Finally, I saved this for the end because it's really only something that I get excited about, and it's not a general positive, but I really liked how they did the Walt Disney parallels with Howard Stark. That promo movie for the Expo, that's literally the Epcot film. I love it. It might sound weird, but my favorite stuff at Disney has always been the edutainment stuff, like Epcot and Carousel of Progress, so seeing them do the Epcot video for Howard Stark is brilliant. Yeah, so I was wrong. This movie is actually pretty solid, though I do have a few complaints. First off, I know the two-villain structure is sort of the MCU method, but I think that sometimes, like in this one, it bloats the movie. Vanko could have totally served as a villain all on his own. Hammer was a villain, but he was so ineffectual and had little to no impact save for the fact that he got Vanko out of prison and gave him technology. I like Hammer, don't get me wrong, but between what I like and what I think makes a better movie wins. Plus, Vanko is a unique new villain who I think goes pretty underutilized, all things considered, and Hammer is just Obadiah Stane Part 2. Like, seriously, his entire motivation is the same as Stane's, money, and we already saw that. I love Rockwell and I like Hammer, but it's more of the same. And the movie is a little bloated with giving them both screen time when we could be using that screen time to get more Vanko. And this is just me and my short attention span, but not every superhero movie has to be 2 hours or more. Like Avengers I get, but I feel like this movie could have been at least 20 minutes shorter. Finally, this is a small thing, but it baffles me. If no one knew Tony was racing, how the hell did Vanko know to attack the track? Like, he's dressed like a bunch of the boiler suit guys outside and not as a waiter, so he obviously wasn't planning on attacking Stark inside the restaurant, and I doubt that he'd have a lot of leeway with those whips attacking the stands. The only way that his plan works is by Tony racing, but no one knew that he was gonna be racing. It's a small detail, but it's so friggin' confusing. Other than that, though, the movie isn't bad. So, while a lot work, the movie can be not necessarily fixed because it's not broken, but the film can be improved. First off, I'd cut out Hammer. I love him, but I'd rather dedicate the time we spend on him as the main villain to Vanko. Vanko planned a lot of stuff on his own in regards to the armor and the Monaco thing. He could have totally found his way into an old Stark Industries warehouse, maybe one that Stain hid or was disused by Howard so Tony doesn't know about it, and use that to fight against Tony. Giving Vanko more to do, letting his actions mirror Tony's, would have also made Tony's story even more compelling. Most of it already is. The dialogue is great, no changes needed there, and the stuff with Black Widow can all pretty much stay because Hammer is so inconsequential to those scenes that removing him doesn't change a damn thing about him. Tony still self-destructs and Pepper breaks away from him, so that's why Tony isn't at the expo and is instead creating that new element. As cool and impressive as the fight with all the drones is, it might have been more impressive if Vanko, using his know-how, turned Tony's own robots against him. Maybe Tony had some setup at the expo using Iron Man tech. Maybe because Tony knew he was dying, he worked on creating some viable replacements to take the load of being Iron Man off of him. Since, Jarvis said that Iron Man activities were exacerbating the palladium poisoning. That way, the ending fight stays mostly the same, except we lose Hammer. Losing Hammer would probably also bring the runtime down about 20 minutes, though the 2-hour runtime might be justified if all the villain focus went to Vanko. Have the government as a secondary antagonist when Rhodey steals the suit, and maybe Hammer as a small part as that weapons guy, and then Vanko takes control of Tony's stuff and hijacks Rhodey after he comes in for an assist. The point I'm making here is that despite my previous feelings, the movie is really damn good, and there are just a few small tweaks needed to bump it up and make it on par with the first movie. And that was Iron Man 2, a movie that I really misjudged. I still have no earthly clue why I hated it when I first saw it. Then again, people change a lot in 6 years. For example, the guy who hated Iron Man 2, he also thought that this was a good fighting pose.
Well, looks like I'm gonna have to stop you.
Seriously, what the hell was I thinking? Maybe I liked the first one so much that it blinded me to the quality in the second one, but I don't know. All in all, Iron Man 2 is not the worst Marvel movie out there, and it's not the best, but I still maintain that the original Iron Man is still the best MCU movie of all time, and nothing has topped it. But I haven't gotten around to seeing Black Panther yet, and all the buzz about that has convinced me that it has a shot at usurping that title. In the meantime, if you'd like to see more of how to fix it, you can hit that subscribe button, and if you have any comments or complaints about the video, you can put those in the comment section below. Oh, and if you want to be notified of new uploads, you can hit the bell icon. And if you enjoyed the video, show it to your friends and share it around the internet. And check out the Patreon page. I spent all of last weekend revamping it, so new video, new stretch goals, check them out. See you next time when we find out the results of that Star Trek viewer request poll. 2 of those books are good, and one of them is really bad. I really hope you guys picked one of the good ones. he's dying, and apparently he lives by Kurgan rules. Better to burn out than fade away.